In July of 2025, the CEO of OpenAI sat down at the Federal Reserve in front of some of the most powerful bankers in the world and said something that should have made headlines for a week. He said, "It does in fact look like we're about to deliver an intelligence too cheap to meter." Too cheap to meter, meaning so cheap it's not even worth counting anymore. He wasn't exaggerating for effect. He backed it up with a number. The cost of a single unit of AI intelligence has dropped by more than a factor of 10 every single year for 5 years straight. But here's what almost nobody points out in the coverage of that moment. Sam Altman didn't invent that phrase. He borrowed it from 1954, from a man promising something completely different and something that never actually happened the way he said it would. So guys, today we're going to ask the question that actually matters. Is intelligence becoming free? And if it's becoming free, for whom and for what cost exactly? So guys, let's get into it. So let's start with what intelligence actually costs in real dollar times. When GPT-3 became publicly available in November 2021, it was the only model in the world that could hit a certain benchmark score, an MMLU of 42, which is a standard test in general knowledge and reasoning. Getting that level of performance costs about $60 per million tokens. Today, a model that matches that same performance costs 6 cents per million token. 6 cents. Not $60, 6 cents. That is a 1,000 times price collapse in 3 years for the exact same capability. Venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz gave this trend a name, LLMflation, inflation running in reverse. It's not just the older, weaker models getting cheaper either. Look at GPT, for example, genuinely one of the most capable models in the world when it launched in March 2023. At launch, GPT-4 cost $30 per million input tokens, $60 per million output token. By the middle of 2026, you could get equal or better quality from competing models for under 50 cents per million tokens. That's a 95% price drop in 2 years and close to a 1,000 time drop over 3. And this is in many companies' marketing claim. Stanford University's AI Index, one of the most respected, independently compiled reports on the states of AI, and found that inference costs for a GPT 3.5 level system dropped 280 times between late 2022 and late 2024. 280 times in 2 years. Boys, for context, nothing in the history of computing has gotten cheaper this fast. Not processors during the microprocessors boom, not bandwidth during the dot-com era. So when South Altman says intelligence is becoming too cheap to meter, the data actually backs him up. But here is where it really gets interesting.
We've heard this before.
Boys, that phrase too cheap to meter did not start with Sam Altman. It didn't start with the AI at all. It was first said in September of 1954 by a man named Louis Strauss, who was chairman of the United States Atomic Energy Commission at the time. Now, Strauss stood in front of a room of science writers in New York and predicted that nuclear energy would soon be so cheap it wouldn't even be worth putting a meter on it. The same way water at the time was too cheap to bother metering. His actual words were that future generations will enjoy electrical energy too cheap to meter. It became one of the most quoted lines in the history of energy policy, and it became, over the following decades, a symbol of a promise that didn't come true. Nuclear power did not become free. It became in most places some of the most expensive electricity to produce, largely because of the safety regulations and infrastructure costs that came after incidents like 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl reshapes how the world approach nuclear risk. So when the CEO of OpenAI reaches for that same phrase 71 years later to describe artificial intelligence, that is either a remarkably confident echo or a warning sign, depending on how you look at it. Because here's the uncomfortable question: how many times in the history has someone stood in front of powerful people and confidently promised that a new technology will become free, unlimited, and world-changing right before the cost showed up somewhere no one else was looking? That's not a reason to dismiss what's happening with AI. The pricing data in section 1 is real, but it's a reason to ask the next question very carefully now, instead of just repeating the headline. Here's the part that almost never makes it into the intelligence is basically free now headlines. Falling per token prices has not resulted in falling total AI bills for the company actually using this technology. In many cases, the opposite is happening. Enterprises are watching their per query cost collapse and watching their total monthly AI spending multiply at the same time. According to industry cost and analytic reporting, inference now represents 85% of the total AI budget, driven by a shift from simple chatbots to always-on, constantly running AI agents. So boys, why does this happen? Because when something gets cheaper per unit, people, they don't feel useless of it. They use dramatically more of it. A simple expired workflow that pulls the reference document can consume 3 to 5 times more token than a simple question, just to give the model enough context to answer properly. This is not a new pattern. Economists have a name for it. It's called Jevons paradox, first observed with coal in the 1800s. When something becomes more efficient to use, total consumption of it tends to rise, not fall. And there's a second hidden cost that almost never gets mentioned, the environmental one. Now, Stanford's AI Index estimates that training a single frontier model, XAI's Grok 4, generated around 72,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions. For comparison, that is roughly the annual footprints of a small city. AI data center capacity has also reached a scale that's hard to picture. Stanford reports put current global AI data center capacity at nearly 30 gigawatts, comparable to the entire peak electricity of New York State. Not the city, the entire New York State. So intelligence isn't really becoming free. It's becoming radically cheaper to access, while the total resource cost of producing it keeps climbing somewhere most users never see. That's not the same thing as too cheap, too Vita. It's closer to the cost being moved somewhere else and metered differently. Boys, here's where this actually connects to your life and not just to enterprise budgets and data center reports. Generative AI adoption reached 53% of the population within 3 years of ChatGPT's launch, faster than the personal computer, faster than the internet itself. Stanford estimates the tools you and I use every day at worth around $172 billion a year in value delivered. So that's the upside, and it's real. But if you watch our last episode, you already know where this is going. Falling prices do not mean evenly distributed benefits. The same divide we talked about, the daily versus the occasional users, applies here too. Cheap access to intelligence is not the same as knowing what to do with it. 3 things to actually take from this. Number 1, don't confuse cheaper access with real value. The falling price is real, but it's not the whole cold story, and it's not evenly shared. Number 2, The gap between people who use these tools constantly and people who use them occasionally is going to widen faster as the price of entry keeps dropping, because the barrier stops being cost and starts being knowledge of how to actually use it properly. And guys, number 3, be skeptical of any phrase that promises something is about to become free or limitless. We've had that same sentence before. History doesn't remember it kindly. So boys, let's bring it together now. Altman says we're close to intelligence too cheap to meter. The pricing data actually supports him. Cost has fallen by a factor of 1,000 in just a few years. But that exact phrase was first used 71 years ago about nuclear power, and it never came through the way it was promised. The cost didn't disappear. It never did. They moved into safety, regulation, into infrastructure, into places nobody was watching. It's government. The same thing looks like it's happening with AI right now. Cheaper per unit, more expensive in total, with real environmental costs sitting just outside the frame of the headline. Intelligence is not becoming free. It's becoming cheap enough that the real cost is not about money, but about who actually knows how to use it. If you haven't watched episode 3 yet, where we talked about the widening gap between people who use AI constantly and people who don't, go watch that video because it connects directly into everything in this segment. And if this changed how you think about the next headline that promises something is about to become free, subscribe because we've got a lot of this coming. And as always, boys, I'll see you in the next one.
You cannot stop what is coming. No one can.